Welcome to day 25 of our 101 Days of Data Science. Today we'll explore essential libraries that make Python a powerhouse in data science. These tools are crucial for building machine learning models and deep learning architectures. Python's ecosystem is rich with powerful libraries that streamline data science workflows. Today, our focus will be on two critical libraries: Scikit-learn for machine learning and TensorFlow, with Keras for deep learning applications. Scikit-learn is a library that simplifies the process of building machine learning models. It provides an easy-to-use interface for various algorithms, whether you're working on classification, regression, or clustering tasks. In our example, we load the iris dataset, split it into training and testing sets, and use a random forest classifier to build a model. Scikit-learn makes this process fast and simple, allowing for efficient model evaluation. Let's break down each part of the code to understand it in more detail. So first things first, we're using the iris dataset in this example, which is one of the classic datasets in machine learning. It has measurements for different types of iris flowers, things like sepal length, petal width, and their species labels. We're using this data to build a model that can predict the species of an iris flower based on those measurements. We start by importing some key libraries. We're bringing in train test split from scikit-learn.model-selection, which is going to help us divide the data into two parts, one for training the model and one for testing it. Then there's random forest classifier, which is a powerful machine learning algorithm we'll use to actually classify the flowers. Finally, we load the iris dataset with load_iris. Next, we load up the dataset by calling load_iris. This dataset comes with two main parts: X, which holds the features like sepal length and petal width, and Y, which has the labels, meaning the actual species of the flowers. So X is the input data, and Y is what we want the model to learn to predict. Now, because we don't want to test our model on the same data it's trained on, that would be cheating, we split the dataset into two parts: training and testing sets. We use train test split for this. Here, we're saying, let's use 70% of the data for training and keep the remaining 30% for testing. By setting the random state to 42, we ensure that every time we run this code, we get the same split of the data, which helps us reproduce the results. With the data split, we move on to building the actual random forest model. A random forest is basically a collection of decision trees that work together to make predictions. We create the model using random forest classifier, and then we train it on the training data, xtrain and ytrain, with model.fit. Here, the model learns patterns in the data. Essentially, it's figuring out the relationships between flower measurements and their species. After the training is done, we ask the model to make predictions on the test data, xtest. This is where the model sees data it hasn't encountered before, and it tries to predict the species of these flowers based on what it learned during training. Lastly, we evaluate how well the model performed. We use model score to get the accuracy, which is simply the percentage of correct predictions the model made when we compare its guesses to the actual species in the test set. The result, the accuracy, is printed out at the end. In a nutshell, this code walks through a typical machine learning workflow: loading the data, splitting it, training the model, making predictions, and then checking how well the model did. It's a neat and straightforward example of how random forests can be used for classification tasks like this one. TensorFlow and Keras are essential for building neural networks. TensorFlow provides the computational power, while Keras offers a user-friendly interface, making it easier to construct complex deep learning models. In our code example, we define a simple neural network with one hidden layer using Keras. The model is compiled with the Atom optimizer and trained on the iris dataset, showcasing Keras's approachability for beginners. Let's break down each part of the code. We're setting up a simple neural network here using TensorFlow and Keras. Keras, by the way, is like a high-level interface for building and training neural networks. It makes it really easy to create complex models without getting bogged down in the low-level details. To start with, we import TensorFlow and then pull in the specific parts of Keras that we need: sequential for building the model, and dense and input layers, which will form the actual layers of our neural network. Now, let's build the neural network. The model we're creating is called sequential because it's just a sequence of layers, one after the other. The first layer is the input layer, which expects an input shape of 4 features. This could be something like the 4 measurements of the iris flowers, similar to the last example we talked about. Next up, we add a dense layer with 16 neurons or units. Each neuron in this layer is connected to all the inputs, and we're using the RealU activation function here. RealU, which stands for Rectified Linear Unit, is a popular choice because it helps the network learn faster and avoid certain issues like vanishing gradients. After that, we have another dense layer with 3 neurons. This is our output layer, and it's using the softmax activation function. Now, softmax is great for classification problems like this one, where we have multiple classes. Essentially, it converts the output into probabilities, where the highest probability corresponds to the predicted class. Since we're likely dealing with 3 classes, like 3 different species of flowers, we have 3 neurons in the output. Once the model structure is ready, we need to compile it. Compiling is like setting the rules for how the model will learn. Here, we use the Adam optimizer, which is a popular choice because it adapts the learning rate during training, making the process more efficient. For the loss function, we're using sparse past categorical tanh cross entropy because we're dealing with a multi-class classification problem, and our target labels are integers, not one-hot encoded. We also specify accuracy as a metric, so we can keep track of how well the model is doing during training. Now we train the model by calling the fit function. We pass in the training data xtrain and ytrain and specify the number of epochs, which in this case is 10. Each epoch means the model will go through the entire training dataset once. During this training process, the model is learning the relationships between the input features and the corresponding output labels. Finally, after the model is trained, we evaluate it using the test data, XU test and Y test, to see how well it performs on data it hasn't seen before. The evaluate mode function gives us 2 things: the loss, which we can think of as how off the model's predictions are, and the accuracy, the percentage of correct predictions. We then print out the model's accuracy. The model accuracy you're seeing, 0.4, essentially means that the model is correct 40% of the time when making predictions on the test data. In other words, out of all the test samples, the model correctly predicted the class for 40% of them. While the accuracy is low, it's a good starting point for tweaking the model and improving its performance. In this example, we've walked through building a simple neural network for a classification task, training it, and then evaluating how well it performs. It's a great introduction to how neural networks work and how you can quickly build one using TensorFlow and Keras. Today we explored Scikit-learn for machine learning and TensorFlow with Keras for deep learning. These libraries form the foundation of your predictive modeling toolkit, enabling the creation of simple classifiers and advanced neural networks. Tomorrow, we'll dive into exploratory data analysis, EDA, an essential step before any modeling. EDA helps you understand your data better, ensuring it's clean, structured, and ready for the next steps in your data science journey.